Hi everyone, this is Dr. Giobbi and this is part 2 of my close reading of Erich Fromm's The Revolution of Hope Towards a Humanized Technology. We are now going to take a look at Chapter 1, The Crossroads. I have a number of aspects of this text underlined. As you can see, I'm just opening up the text. I have quite a few things that I think are important. So I'm going to go through each chapter and hit on the things that I underlined and discuss them with you. And this is typically what is done in a close reading. You sit down with the professor and it's assumed that the students did the reading before sitting down at the seminar table, and then you'll go around and each of the participants in the course, in the class, will do what I'm doing. Each will, so we'd sit down with chapter 1. So I'm doing this for everybody in the class. It's a lot of work. So in other words, we'd sit down with chapter 1. And if we were actually sitting down around a table together, I would say, so Sarah, tell me what struck you from chapter 1. And that may have followed a little introduction that I would give to chapter 1. And we go around the table, and it would be assumed that each person had done the reading and had given thought to the reading and had their own areas underlined. And then, of course, a commentary starts, a conversation. So I'm taking on the role of all of you, and I'm like the sole participant in this seminar, reading for you and then explaining to you what I take from from the text. Now, you're writing papers so that's your contribution. That's your contribution to our close reading discussion here. That I get to hear what you have to say, because obviously I can't hear you. Okay, so chapter 1, the Crossroads. Remember, this is a 1968 text being written about the need for a very conscientious awareness of something that is very dangerous that Fromm saw taking place in society, which was a dehumanization using people. He uses the term man as a gender-neutral term, as human, short for human, and I'll fall into that habit. Be aware of that. When I'm saying man, I'm not meaning anything about gender. I'm meaning as a customary way of saying human, and I often say human, but if I say man, this is what I'm talking about. This was written in 1968. The rhetorical style was different then. But Fromm didn't mean men. He meant human beings, humans. Okay, so a specter is stalking in our midst, whom only a few see with clarity. It is not the old ghost of communism or fascism. It is a new specter, a completely mechanized society devoted to maximal material output and consumption, directed by computers. And in this social progress, man himself is being transformed into a part of the total machine. Well fed and entertained, yet passive, unalive, and with little feeling. With the victory of the new society, individualism and privacy will have disappeared. Feelings towards others will be engineered by psychological conditioning and other devices, or drugs, which also serve a new kind of introspective experience. As Brzezinski puts it, in the technotronic society, the trend would seem to be towards the aggregation of the individual support of millions of uncoordinated citizens, easily within the reach of magnetic and attractive personalities, effectively exploiting the latest communication techniques to manipulate emotions and control reason. This new form of society has been predicted in the form of fiction in George Orwell's 1984, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. So what he is opening up this statement, he's saying there's something going on in society. And he says it's a ghost, a specter is haunting. Something is looming. It's ominous. It's a danger is looming. It sounds like this in music. Hear it? That's the question. The question that what is going on, something, and it doesn't sound too good. It doesn't sound very hopeful. Something is looming. You may have noticed that sound from the scenes in the silent movie pictures when the train is coming towards the girl tied to the tracks. And you hear this. It's an impending doom. That's the feel of this paragraph. He's saying only a few people can see it with clarity. There are only some people that are sensitive to it because many people are caught up in it. They're enchanted by it. Who can see it clearly? It's described by George Orwell in his fiction. It's described by Aldous Huxley in his fiction, Brave New World, and George Orwell's 1984. I would add to this list Animal Farm and another one, Fahrenheit 541. These are really all depicting a society of the future that has become dangerously in love with a technology, a technological society that is treating humans as a means to an end rather than humans as an end to themselves. There is an episode in The Twilight Zone. I learned most of my social theory from The Twilight Zone long before college. The old Twilight Zone from the late 50s and through the 1960s. And there's one episode called The Old Man in the Cave. And it's about a dystopian society where there's been nuclear war. There's been and the food has all been contaminated. And there's an old man in a cave that gives direction to the people. It tells them when they should plant crops, if they should eat food that they had found, or if it's contaminated by the radiation, etc. And at the end of the episode, you find out that this old man, this wise old man in the cave, is actually a computer. And there are quite a few of the Twilight Zone episodes that could be that are really great, and you can teach Fromm with Twilight Zone episodes, or Frankfurt School critical theory in general. So he goes on, perhaps the most ominous aspect at present is that we seem to lose control over our own system. We execute the decisions which our computer calculations make for us. We as human beings have no aims except producing and consuming more and more. So this is the aim, the intention, the goal is profit, is not growth, but progress. And that progress is always progressing towards something. And this is not a progress, as Fromm is describing, of humanity, of interest in humans and ethics, in a humanized world, care, life, biophilia, but rather a profit-driven motive: profit, money, power, control, dominance. So political currency, economic currency, intellectual commodity currency, how to control others. As I'm reading this, two things come to my mind in the first paragraph that I left off and now are really coming to my mind, and that is the role of influencers today. This influencer, how do we're drawn to someone who presents themselves as with a certain authority, and typically the influencers have low on knowledge, low on wisdom, and very high on charisma. And that is what Fromm is talking about. That coupled with the idea of algorithm. Fromm doesn't use the term algorithm, but he uses the term of computerized decision making. And our algorithm, what our feed is feeding us, that is tailored to be sensitive to what our likes and dislikes are. There's, as we learned earlier in this course in Dopamine Nation, there's great value in embracing and studying and looking into the opposite of what you believe and feel. This is the idea of the pleasure-pain opponent processing theory. So, and another person who comes to my mind as I'm reading this whole book, someone kept coming up into my mind, Elon Musk. I would love to sit down with Erich Fromm. I wish Erich Fromm were alive today. I guess that's that good cue that I should write something on from Fromm's perspective on Elon Musk. This is someone that we have many people really admire. What do they admire about Elon Musk? He's a charismatic personality. He has that flair. He has financial success. We have a certain admiration for his brazenness, etc. However, there's something that feels in many ways necrophilic about his character type. He's definitely a productive character type. He's an exploitative character type, and he's definitely a marketing character type. I don't know about hoarding character type. I don't know. Maybe he hoards money or he hoards power. I don't know. But a lot of those 5 character types that are based on Sartre's bad faith that we talked about, that Fromm discussed as a character type and orientation: marketing, productive, hoarding, and exploitative character types. We see many of these character types celebrated today. And if the algorithm feeds us this on our Instagram feed, on our YouTube feed, on our Facebook, whatever you're using, the media, social media, whatever you're looking into, the algorithm is feeding you more of that. So these are some ideas that are coming to my mind, and what he is going to want to push towards is a greater awareness of the marketing type character, the person who's trying to sell you something, who sees you as a means rather than as an end in yourself. You are the means to get money, to get power, etc. So he's marketing. This is the idea that you might learn that you have to have an image. Universities and businesses hire PR firms to create an image for them. That's the marketing character. People who look and they get a certain style going, and they see it and they want to present themselves in a style. That's a person who puts themselves on the character a commodity market, and isn't being an authentic human being who's treating others as an end in themselves, but is using tricks and styles and fashion and images to I think my kitten's getting a little excited. Images to sell themselves in the commodity market of of the character, the cult of personality. We have, this is obviously what Fromm calls the necrophilic character orientation, an orientation towards using and towards death, not towards growth and life. That character type from the sane society is the receptive orientation. The receptive orientation is interested in, like I said, growth and meeting others in an authentic way. And this is the point of this text, is a humanization of these. We have to keep in mind to always make sure that we're using this technology in a way that truly benefits humanity rather than an individual's interest. I have this marked. I have a little note here. Today it is military and desire consumption. Today it is military and desire consumption. How did it happen? How did man, I'm on page 14, how did man at the very height of his victory over nature become the prisoner of his own creation and in serious danger of destroying himself? So what he's saying is, what does he mean, victory over nature? Well, what we have here, since the second industrial revolution, first industrial revolution he describes in The Heart of Man is in the 1700s, when agriculture becomes mechanized. But those machines, the combines, the corn huskers, all these things that were powered by humans and by animals. Ox pulled the machinery. Humans cranked the crank. That's the first industrial revolution. And it really, these machines that were driven by human power and by water power, actually, were very beneficial, but they created a situation where most needs were met: food needs, material needs for clothing and shelter and lumber. Then in the second industrial revolution that Fromm talked about, is the second industrial revolution is the one that happened in the 19th century and into the 20th century. And that is the 19th century industrial revolution was steam powered. And then in the 20th century, electric powered, right? From our own Orange, New Jersey with Thomas Edison. And this created even more abundance. And we are now in a technological revolution, not an industrial revolution. Industry, there is very little industry now in our culture. The industry is now in developing nations. The technological culture, our economy, everything is based on the technology. People are learning to how they're finding ways to use technology to make their living, to find meaning in their life, etc. And this is what he's saying is the important thing to think about. What happened with the Industrial Revolution is that we got to a point where there was enough to satisfy needs. There's plenty of cars, there's plenty of sweaters, there's plenty of hats, there's plenty of eyeglasses, there's more. We have now more than we need, but yet people go without. Think about this. We have more than we need. There's a bakery near me, and I love their bagels. And at the end of the day, there are garbage bags filled with uneaten food. What happens to those depends on who's running the business, but many of those destroy the food. But yet people go hungry. When there is an excess of something, in an economic supply and demand, capitalist supply and demand understanding of economics, the more supply, the lower the value. Because demand, the higher the supply, the lower the value. So you have to, so when you're in a situation, Industrial Revolution, when you're in a situation where things are plentiful, You have to do artificial things to restrict the availability so that then there is economic value. So the idea is not how do we have people eat that are hungry. The idea is how do we make profit from what we produce. They're two different orientations. Now there are some humanized solutions to this. And this is maybe a useful example for what Fromm is after. A humanized solution is you take those bagels and you distribute them, go out and distribute them at a homeless shelter, at a food bank or something. You make them available to people who are hungry. Now this, rather than destroying and throwing them away, at some level, this could be an undermining of the profit margin that one's going to make, because it can be argued that why would people pay for it if they could get it for free? But there's something very interesting that happens that Fromm touches on, that is the idea that there's a certain status awareness, and status is a cultural commodity, and people who actually there's in a middle class and upper middle class and bourgeois upper class society, people actually take pleasure in identifying with overpaying for something. It's actually like a badge of honor of look how much I can afford to pay for something. So this kind of people will still pay whatever. I just revealed to you that I get the day-old bagels. I don't even remember. I have no idea what they charge for the fresh bagels, because I always go to the little day-old ones and I get them. I assume they're half price. I don't know what they are. Maybe I'm paying too much. I don't know. But to me, it just seems more ethical for myself. I would rather spend my money on books. Okay, so how did this happen? How did man, at the very height of his victory over nature, become the prisoner of his own creation and in serious danger of destroying himself? We tune in, we watch the YouTube video, we read the articles, we watch the little Instagram things, the reels, and we get this ideology feeding into us, and it affects our perception of ourselves and others and the world. At the moment, one of the gravest symptoms of our system is the fact that our economy rests upon arms production, plus maintenance of the whole defense establishment. On the principle of maximal consumption, we have a well-functioning economic system under the condition that we are producing goods which threaten us with physical destruction, that we transform the individual into a total passive consumer and thus deaden him, that we have created a bureaucracy that makes the individual feel impotent. So what is he saying? He's saying here three things. He's saying, first of all, that we have an economy that is largely, in the 1968, that is largely based on the military-industrial complex. In other words, when the economy is not doing well, going to war creates an economic boom. Why is that? Because suddenly there's a demand for all of the materials of war, tanks and missiles and rubber for the tires and metal, etc., all the commodities. So suddenly now there's a need for workers. People go back to work, the economies, people are making money. And the question is, at whose expense? These are producing, in a bigger picture, our economy, he's saying, is based on something that's killing us. Now, he also talks about this, it threatens us with physical destruction. That we transform the individual into a total passive consumer. What does this mean? A passive consumer, this is the person who feels a certain emptiness, a certain loss and a meaninglessness in life. We have 6 psychological needs that Fromm talks about frequently. And those 6 psychological needs are a need for of purpose, of orientation. We have a basic human need, he says, for purpose. We have a need for stimulation, for growth, getting turned on to new ideas like you're doing in college and like you will continue to do after college by taking lectures on the internet or reading. There's an ethical, humanized society when you can turn onto the internet and hear professors give lectures for free. That's a humanized technology. A rootedness, a sense of belongingness, a sense of being a meaningful part of something that can be very dangerously exploited. Identity, having a sense of answering the question, who am I? And Fromm answers that question very interestingly in this text and in his text To Have or to Be. You can watch the interview that I've provided that gives a nice summary of that book. And that is, we don't have identity based on who we are, on what we have, rather, having money, having degrees, having this zip code, having this physical appearance, but a secure identity is based on what we do. And I don't mean what our profession is. I mean how we act, what our behavior is. Very ethically oriented. I am how I behave, not what degrees are after my name, letters are after my name or before my name, or look at me. All these degrees up on the wall that you can't see from your point of view. Also relatedness. We have a need to relate to others, a need to, not everybody, have a relationship with others, to be meaningful to someone else, and to have others that are meaningful to us. The importance of the student-teacher, mentor-mentee relationship. This is a basic psychological need. And the need for transcendence. What is the need for transcendence? The need for transcendence for Fromm is the need to transcend beyond the basic biological needs and the basic fundamental physical aspects of reality, and transcend in a spiritual way. This doesn't necessarily mean the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition or any other world religion. It means transcending, that there's something bigger than me. And I don't mean me, I mean ego, I. So if we take these 6 psychological needs that Fromm is talking about, we understand that these can be exploited in many different ways. And in one of those ways is fulfilling the need of purpose, the need of identity, the need of relating to others by being a mindless consumer, a shopper. I saw a little bio on somewhere I went to a medical office, and they have little bios of the doctors, and the doctors say what they like to do in their free time. Oh, I like to fly airplanes, I like to go hiking, as one said. And then there were some other staff members, and one of the secretaries said she said in her spare time she likes to shop. I would love to have Eric Fromm's impression. That's it. This is not, one shops because one needs something. One doesn't shop because that's their identity. And you have to ask, what is this person escaping through shopping? What is the person escaping through consuming, gluttonous consuming, not out of need but beyond satisfaction? So these are all little ideas. So I had in my margin today, it is military and desire consumption. I don't know if so much has changed since Fromm's times here. Let's see here. On page 15, I have underlined the new society. Okay, the answer to these questions differ. Oh, here are the questions. Are we confronted with a tragic, insolvable dilemma? Must we produce sick people in order to have healthy economy? In other words, we have to produce neurotic people who need to buy to feel good about themselves to sustain the economy. Do we have to produce scared people who are fearful of and need to be protected, to have more and more weapons and military, etc., in order to sustain our society. Like, what do we have to foster unhealthful, healthful individuals to support the economic system? That's an interesting question to think about. Think about this. When you're watching the next influencer putting the makeup, or the body weight influencer, or whomever the influencer is that you're watching on your machine, are they sowing the seeds of insecurity and inferiority in you that makes you dependent on what they have to offer? Is this, in essence, the new sin? Don't do this. You do it. Now you need more redemption from the source. A religious practice, different from a spiritual practice. Must we produce sick people in order to have a healthy economy? Or can we use our material resources, our inventions, our computers to serve the ends of man, the humans themselves, as an end in themselves? Must individuals be passive and dependent in order to have strong and well-functioning organizations? Fromm says, to answer these questions, the answers to these questions differ. Among those who recognize the revolutionary and drastic change in human life, which is the mega machine, could bring about, that the writers who say that the new society is unavoidable, hence that there is no point in arguing about its merits. At the same time, they are sympathetic to the new society, although they express slight misgivings about what it might do to man as we know him. Brzezinski and Herman Kahn are representatives of this attitude. On the other end of the spectrum is Jacques Ellul. Ellul was a professor at NYU, who in his Technological Society describes with great force the new society which we are approaching and its destructive influence on man. He faces the specter of a dreadful lack of humanness. So Ellul, incidentally, wrote a great book in which he said that the people who go to university and get advanced degrees get indoctrinated into a system of thought that makes them the most susceptible to embracing stuff that's not healthful about society, because they get so deep into it. And he would argue that quite possibly the best person to seek for wisdom is the farmer who isn't watching the 24/7 news feed, who isn't reading all the latest and greatest texts, all the academic stuff that goes along. This is very much of Martin Heidegger. He said the decision making, the wisest folks are the people who are closest to the earth. I don't know about that. I think that it's a great, interesting argument. So we have two different attitudes to the answering of this question. One says the new society is unavoidable and that there is no point in arguing about its merits. They are sympathetic to the new society, although they express slight misgivings about what it might do to man as we know him. This is one attitude to answer these questions. The other end is Jacques Ellul, who in his Technological Society describes with great force the new society which we are approaching and its destructive. This is, watch out, this is dangerous stuff, and it's reversible. There's another individual that I have underlined here, Lewis Mumford. Lewis Mumford's position on it's similar to that Ellul. He wrote a classic text, The Myth of the Machine. And Mumford is someone, he was a sociologist. He wrote this book in 1966. My dearest friend is a professor of sociology. We've been friends since birth. Well, since his birth, because I'm 2 years older. And he went on to be a sociology professor. In all of his graduate work and undergraduate work in sociology, he had never heard of Mumford. And we both got turned on to Mumford through Erich Fromm and found, look him up. You know the name of the spelling because you have the book here, but The Myth of the Machine, check it out. It's unbelievable. And you wonder, how are these voices forgotten? People who have such important things to say. Mumford describes the mega machine, starting with its first manifestations in Egyptian and Babylonian societies. But in contrast to those who, like the previously mentioned authors, recognize the specter of either sympathy or horror of the majority of men, those at the top of the establishment and the average citizen who do not see a specter, a ghost, something dangerous lurking. Remember, when you hear that word specter, that's what you think. Whoops. That's the ghost of the oncoming specter. They have the old-fashioned belief that the 19th century, that the machine will help lighten man's burden and that it will remain a means to an end, and they do not see the danger that the technology is permitted to follow its own logic. It will become a cancer-like growth. This is greatly discussed right now in artificial intelligence, eventually threatening the structured system of the individual and social life. The position taken in his book, Mumford, it is perhaps different in the sense that I see somewhat greater possibility in restoring the social system to man's control. So what Fromm is arguing here is that we have to be careful of these algorithms. Jean Lehrer, this is the guy who invented the term cyberspace. He wrote a book that we studied in this class last year when I ran it. It's, here it is. Down here in my collection, I should show you my collection of media library collection. Jean Lehrer, 10 arguments for deleting your social media accounts right now. We studied this last year in this class. And what he describes in this is he's one of the guys who developed this stuff, and he describes the danger of letting artificial intelligence make the rules for where technology is going. Have you played around with ChatGPT? I have to tell you that I have read some essays submitted for this class that look awfully like ChatGPT responses, and they usually come back very systematically bulleted. I go on Reddit sometimes, and I put in questions. And I say, so-and-so, what is that, to a philosophy group or a psychology group, and I say, can someone tell me the difference between the philosophy of Schopenhauer and the philosophy of Heidegger? And then you'll get people with doctorates and people who are farmers responding, who have an interest from the heart. And I got one, and it was a professor. And the response, it was dead on ChatGPT style. And I knew it. I saw it. I recognized it. No, he did not write this. So if you spend time with a GPT like I do, you start to get the feel for this. It's almost like when I read your writing, I get the feel of how you write, your style. So Fromm is saying this stuff can be beneficial. The technology can be beneficial. But what we really need to be aware of is, I had a glitch. My mind just glitched. Did you see it happen? I got to reboot. I am a computer after all. We have to maintain the humanity in this by being the ones who make the ultimate decisions. And this is why you can't use, at the most basic level, you can't use reference generators. You have to do it yourself. You can't trust the technology. The moment you do this, the moment you give in, the moment you allow the technology to think for itself, and it can lift your burden, but you have to go back and you have to look at it and monitor it and say, I'm the final authority, not it. That's what I try to teach you with the APA, referencing and staying away from generators. And I see again in your papers, I know who's using the reference generators. I don't always come out and call you on it, but because you know too. But I know too. I see the clues of it. And I'll say to you, you got to do this by hand. So here, to finish this chapter up, chapter 1, he's saying the following chapters coming up attempt to discuss in detail some of the problems that are outlined in this first chapter between human nature and socioeconomics. So the crux of the issue here is not the technology, but a technology that is left to, it's like giving a child, allowing the child to set their own rules, and that can be problematic. It's a technology can't set its own rules through artificial intelligence. The human being must remain a part of it. We can't get lazy. It's doing the work for us, but we need to monitor it. We need to monitor every decision and give it the final okay or veto for it to remain humanized. We also have to reshape the intention of the technology from one of profit to one of truly benefiting humanity, not the top of the pyramid, not the bottom, all this exploited for the benefit of this, top of the pyramid, but the technology being used to benefit everyone in the circle. The discussion of the present situation and its potential for hope should be preceded by a discussion of the phenomenon of hope. And that's what we'll turn to in our next chapter, chapter 2, defining what hope is.